screen, I'll record it.
And now let's share. All right. So hello, and I hope you're enjoying DataOps Summit so far. And I'm Ben, and I'm going to speak about enabling a share-first mindset with DataSecOps. So a little bit about myself. My name is Ben Hertberg. I'm a DataSecOps guy. My background is mainly from the security space and development, engineering. I'm a chief scientist for Satori, the DataSecOps platform. So I'm leading the research for the company. Before that, I was leading research for Imperva. Before that, I was CTO of Cynet and a bunch of other things. And I'm also a co-author of a Snowflake security book by Apres Springer. So, and that's me, both in the video and in the photo. And here are my contact details in case you have any comments or questions or anything like that, or you want to tweet. I'm on the session about share first with DataSecOps. Okay, so let's begin. What are we going to talk about today? Today we are going to talk about data sharing. I'm mainly speaking about data sharing within a specific organization, within the organization itself, though what I'm saying is also relevant for sharing with other organizations, such as sharing data with vendors, sharing data with data processors, and so on. So we're going to speak about data sharing. We're going to speak about some of the approaches or strategies, quote unquote, of data sharing. And I'm saying quote unquote because many times companies get to these approaches not because they decide they want to do it, it's just phases that they are going through. And we're going to speak about the share first mindset, or the need to share mindset, and why, when is it good, why is it good. And we will wrap it up with DataSecOps and why DataSecOps is important for modern data sharing approach. So we're speaking about interesting topics. I like them. So let's get started with data sharing. And I'll start with my. I shared some of my, what I've done before Satori and also in Satori, and in previous companies as well as in Satori, I've had an awesome treasure chest full of data. For example, when I was at Imperva, I was leading the research. Imperva is protecting hundreds of thousands of web applications. And as the leader of the research in the company, I had great data. Who is attacking who? And what is the attacks that are going on? What types of attacks? What's the actual payloads of the attacks? Lots of great content. Sorry. Lots of great content. So, and this content was very helpful for my group. Obviously, we had security experts and data scientists and analysts and people who use this data to make the web more secure. But it was also very useful for other teams as well. For example, let's say that customer success can take the data and understand which customers are getting the most value from the service by analyzing this data, and even apply models and predict which customers are going to churn or which customers are going to grow, and all sorts of things. For example, support teams, when they encounter problems with customers, they can understand better how to help them, how they can close the tickets faster. Basically, that's their KPI, closing tickets faster, right? Customer success KPI is growing customer accounts or reducing churn or whatever. And so on and so forth. There are many other teams in the organization which could use this data, as well as engineering teams, for example, to improve all sorts of things. I was, let's put on one of the data hats. I was the data owner, right? I was the data owner and the data creator, or someone from my team was the data creator. Some people were the data creators. I was the data owner, and I was in charge of this data. I was not happy to share this data. I was someone who was deeply involved in the business aspect of the company. I knew how good it is to share the data. I was sharing the data, but it was very hard for me to share the data because, you know, it's my responsibility, this data, and it's very hard to share data, you know, with sensitive data intertwined, etc. And I'm not the only one. As a data owner, as data owners, we have responsibility over the data, and it's very hard to share data with the rest of the organization. So as Gartner says, which is always a great, you know, a must-have slide in any slide deck, as Gartner says, data sharing is a business necessity to accelerate digital business, which is really sums it up. You are scared to share data as someone who's responsible for this data, but the business needs data sharing because it's a huge growth accelerator. It's a huge fuel for data democratization in the organization. Having data accessibility, having people access data and make sense and make value out of this data is tremendous for the business. So as an example, if Ben is scared to share the data, we need to get rid of Ben's phobia and find a way to cure it. But we need those customer success people to have access to this data, secure access to this data without adding a significant security risk, but we need them to reduce churn by 5%, I don't know, you know, to make their goal better. And so it is very important. I can't stress out how important it is for organizations to find ways to share data in a secure way. So moving on, as part of a survey that Gartner had, they have asked, and when data owners, data leaders are sharing more data, they are much more effective at showing and demonstrating verifiable value, and also in increasing business results for the organization itself. And you know, the long-term predictions for the coming years is that organizations that will be good at sharing data. I'm oversimplifying things because that's, you know, that's great to oversimplify, but generically speaking, organizations that will be good at sharing data and that are good at sharing data has better chances of succeeding, because they will have better visibility and better tools to deal with business challenges. However, data sharing has prerequisites. If it was that simple to just share data, then, you know, we wouldn't have any challenges around it, right? But it is very challenging from different perspectives to allow more people to access data within the organization and to be able to make value of it. There are operational challenges, there are security challenges, there are compliance challenges, and we will discuss that. You know, everybody wants value from data, right? It became very easy in the last few years to get from raw data or from enriched data or processed data, to get from data to insights, and from data to dashboards, and from data to reports, and from data to value. It became much easier. The BI tools today are doing a great job, and the data stores themselves, the Snowflakes, BigQueries, Azure Synapses, and other. Did I mention Redshift? You know, all the cloud data warehouses are doing a tremendous job in allowing more and more people, you know, not only data scientists and you know, people who learn data analytics for years, to extract value from data. So everybody wants a piece of that. But data is also getting hard to control. What I mean is that that there are more regulations on data, on, you know, knowing where sensitive data is. What do we need to do in order to store different types of sensitive data? Data is also moving around because there are so many people touching data and able to access data and copying data from one place to another and enriching data. So data is getting harder to control. It's no longer a person or a team of DBAs or a BI team that is, you know, a bottleneck, but is, you know, a simple team to control the data. It's data is more distributed and harder to control as well. So, you know, that's life. Some things are easy and some things are harder. And there are more risks around data as well. There's more security risks because more people have access to data, and we store more data. There's more security risks involved. The more people who can access the data and the more data you have, the more risk you have of different types of bad things happening with the data. Data breaches, for example, data leaks, etc. There's more compliance around data. More regulation is getting more specific. Auditors are getting more sophisticated. For example, I don't know, even trivial things, not trivial, but trivial things like looking into semi-structured data, not being satisfied with you knowing once a year where your sensitive data is. So more compliance and also more places to place this compliance on. You know, not only one team is touching data, so you need to make larger maps, more data that is being accessed, so you need to know more. You need to keep audit of data access, etc. So compliance is also risky / costs a lot to maintain. More privacy issues with you know, all the privacy regulation out there, and also more operational risks when you're opening access to more and more teams within the organization. So, you know, on one end, it's great to hear from Gartner and from others and from Ben that it's important to share data, but it's also hard enough to, you know, to hold all of this data and process all of this data as well. So I would like to concentrate on 3 approaches to sharing data. And by no chance this is a road, because in many cases I see organizations moving onwards on this road, not necessarily in this direction, but in many cases it is. So there is default to know. Default to know means that there's an organization, a company. In many cases, it's a small, fast-growing company, hyper-growth company, and you know, the notion is that security slows down business, and that, you know, because we are growing so fast and because it's very hard to set proper access control on everything, there's a default to no. People have more access than they need, and that means that, you know, from a data sharing perspective, that's usually a good time, because it's easier, you know, to get access to data. But then in many cases, it can be, there are different drivers like contractual obligations, like regulation, audits, etc., that where the organization needs to move to a need-to-know basis. Not everybody has access to everything, or not a lot of people has access to a lot of things, and most of these things are things that they don't require for the day-to-day job, but you want to allow access only based on a need-to-know basis. So when Ben is from finance, he needs to know X, we want to allow Ben access to X. The main problem with this approach is that it's the classic approach, right? But in many cases it limits data sharing, and it slows down the time to value for data. By the time you, as a data consumer or a potential data consumer, from the time you want access to something until the time you're getting access to something, it may take a long while, and in many cases business does not wait for that. So that's is the main challenge. So then there's the more, I would say it's a little bit of both. It's the need to share, or share first approach to data sharing, which means that the default is to share data within the organization, and you need to opt out in order not to share data, and you need to find the right ways in terms of security, data access, sensitive data discovery, etc. You need to find the right mechanisms to do it in a safe way. So basically, as a data owner or data creator, like my example from earlier, the default should be Ben should by default share the data. If Ben does not want to share data, then Ben needs to set up a different process, because in a need-to-know environment, and this is obviously simplifying, and some organizations are somewhere in between, of course, but the situation is that I'm a data owner. The default is that I don't have anything. I'm not sharing anything, and if someone wants data, they come to me and they ask me for my data. And when there is a need to share, there's probably some sort of a data catalog or a data mart or a data portal where people can see what data they can access, and the default is that they can access it, or at least they can ask for access in a simple way and get it in a, you know, like in the least amount of time. So not all organizations, of course, nothing is true to every company, and each company needs to understand what's best for them. But in many cases, we need to share state of mind, or at least we need to understand what's the closest way we can get there. And of course, things can happen incrementally, but how do we make the process of getting access to data faster? How can we enable data consumers to access data faster? the main challenge, or one of the main challenges is, and this data is according to a survey that we have done, asking around 300 data leaders in Fortune 500 and in hyper-growth companies about their situation. The main problem is that between 70 and 80% of data leaders deal with personal identifiable information. Others also deal with, other sensitive information like PHI, financial data, and so on. But in most cases, you have, and I'm guessing that from the other 20 to 29%, 21 to 29%, some of them maybe they do have PII and they're not certain about it or something, but they deal with PII. It's obviously very tricky to share data that has the PII in it, and 62%, like almost 2/3 of the respondents say that the security and compliance slows down data projects, and they slow down basically access to data as well. So what I'm arguing is that to solve this problem and to make data more accessible in the organizations need to adopt a DataSecOps state of mind. DataSecOps is an agile and holistic security embedded approach to coordinating data, and data that is constantly changing, modern data, and the users, which are also changing rapidly. And the aim is to give the quick data to value process within the organization. So basically, this is it. This is we need to enable quick data to value access. That means that we need to share data within the organization in a fast but private and secure and well-governed way. Basically, DataSecOps means that security is part of the data operations and not an afterthought. So it needs to be part of the entire process. Security teams need to be involved. In many cases, there should be security champions within the data teams, the data operation teams, and the data engineering teams. Anything that is ad hoc, like any project that are, let's do an inventory project and find out all the locations we have with X sensitive data, they need to turn into continuous, you need to know continuously where the sensitive data is. You need to have continuous compliance. So that's another part of DataSecOps. It's important to treat data like you treat applications in the matter of separation of environments, of testing environments, applying automations on checks, on tests and assertions on the security controls themselves, the access controls themselves, making sure that continuously that these access controls are doing what they're meant to do. And it's very important to prioritize on sensitive data. And if you don't know where your sensitive data is, that's your first priority, to know where your sensitive data is, so you can prioritize on securing sensitive data and make sure the data is clearly owned. In many cases, data is not clearly owned. There is this schema or tables or databases or sometimes an entire data store where it's not clearly owned by a single person or team. So that's about that. Last part, which I forgot about, is a simplified and deterministic data access to data. From the moment that the data consumer wants to access data, there should be a clear process that happens the same regardless of whether it's Sunday, Monday, or Friday. And if Ben is from data science and Ben should have access to something without any approval, then Ben should get it ASAP. If he should get an approval from the data owner, he needs to get it also ASAP, just with that approval. But we need to make sure that it's fast. So, I got the animation wrong in here. For some of the things that can happen, from a DataSecOps state of mind, for need to share state of mind of data sharing, is self-service data access. That means that you should lower the barrier of what is the overhead that you have when people need data. Ideally, it should be the click of the button. As you can see in red, only like 20%, 21% has fully automated data access. So that is a point that will probably improve dramatically in the next few years. More and more organizations will have faster self-service access to data. Focus on the sensitive data, like I was saying. If you don't know where your sensitive data is, know where your sensitive data is continuously, and focus on protecting the sensitive data first, because that's where most of your risk is, both from a security and compliance and privacy point of view. And having agile data access, for example, using technologies like dynamic masking, for example, having the ability to give differential privacy according to the role or the user, or even the attributes of the user accessing the data. This is something that is important, instead of creating yet another process to prepare data that takes a lot of time before people can use the data that they're sharing. And security teams and the organization as a whole needs to understand that security is an enabler. It needs to be setting the guidelines, the policies. It needs to monitor, but it needs to understand that it can't be a blocker in the way of the organizations to data. You need to think of the right policies and the right mechanisms and controls that you can apply, so that you can enable data sharing to the most of what your organization can do. And with that, I conclude. You can read more about data security as a whole and securing different technologies. We have lots of guides in our blog and in our website in satoricyber.com. And also, I wrote a couple of articles in there about need to share and about various other topics. I write quite a bit. And of course, keep in touch if you have any questions, any comments, any ideas around this, any collaborations you want to do to help data sharing in the world, etc. Anything at all, feel free to reach out by email, LinkedIn, Twitter, or if you find any other interesting way. And last but not least, if you have a Snowflake and you want to have a copy of my book, I do have a couple of copies that I can send out. So feel free to reach out as well. Not a lot of copies, but so like if 100 people send me an email, so I probably will not be able, but I have a couple of copies as well. So hope you had fun. Hope that you that this drove you to push your organization to share more data internally in a secure way, but pushing the business in that way. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the sessions.